Anyway, I want to transition us to this next panel. It's on the horizon. And it's really a chance to, now that you've built such a great awareness of the transformative efforts that are already taking place on campus, this is a chance to listen to how we're setting up the next 10 years in the context of some grounded commitments of MIT, in the context of what you just learned about on the tables, in the context of the state of the world. So keep those notions churning when you have a chance to open up, with the panelists. So we'll explore what's on the horizon as we prepare for the next decade. And if we could go to the next slide just to set the tone here. In an effort to set the context for this discussion, let's remind us that we're working within this formative guidepost established by the MIT administration with community input on this fast forward plan, which you heard about earlier, right? Setting everything out from decarbonizing the campus to policy to research, teaching and alike. We have this commitment. We have the recommendations of the Task Force 21 and beyond, which has pieces of experiential learning you'll hear about. And then, of course, we had a statement from the administration on efforts to address systemic racism. So the panelists, all of these are available online, by the way, if some of these are new to you. And if you haven't read them, I very much encourage you to take a moment to review them. So the panelists that you'll hear from today have been intentionally selected as they each represent these key priority areas of decarbonizing the campus, the imperative of climate justice, educating the next generation of climate leaders, and we'll explore how these influence and advance the next decade of work. But most importantly, and this is why we're all here together again today, is the intersectionality of these plans. These can't live siloed and independently. We have to understand the intersections. It's going to be grueling, some of this. We have to figure this out, but these aren't meant to be compartmentalized structures. And so, next slide. So without further ado, our esteemed panelists will reflect and dive deep. We all work closely together, right? So that's the idea here as well. And we'll reflect on how we got here, what these critical changes are that we have to make. And if we succeed, how will this be reflected at MIT and ultimately in our grand ambitions that we've outlined today? So I'm now going to invite our 4 campus leaders to the stage who've been actively engaged in all of these efforts, sometimes work together, sometimes not. It depends on the day. So I'd like to bring John Fernández, Director of Environmental Solutions Initiative, Joe Higgins, Vice President for Campus Services and Stewardship, Susie Jones, the Senior Sustainability Project Manager in our office, and Kate Trimble, the Senior Associate Dean for Experiential Learning. If you could all come up here, and we'll dive right in. Thank you. Can you guys see over here?
On the end? I'm sitting under my picture.
That's right. Great. Steve was going to get me a pillow to sit on, but that hasn't been delivered yet. No?
They're sending a phone book over.
Okay, all right, there we go. I'll take that. All right, well, nice to see all of you guys. This is really a treat to have you all together in one space. But let's begin with a brief introduction of each of you, from each of you, on your unique roles and how you're advancing MIT's commitment in advancing Fast Forward, the commitment to systemic racism, Task Force 21. You cover all of these, either both individually and collectively. So let's start with John. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for the invitation. Very nice to be with you all. It's great to still, start up in-person events again. So my role is as Director of the Environmental Solutions Initiative. I'm a professor in the Department of Architecture in the Building Technology program. I come to this role as the Director of the ESI by way of work in the built environment and cities, and the ESI essentially is the organization at MIT that considers a huge range of environmental topics that are generally non-energy related or adjacent to energy related topics because, of course, we have the Energy Initiative. I've been doing this for a few years. Our role essentially is to enable and to accelerate work in climate change and other environmental challenges like biodiversity, enable the faculty and researchers by way of providing homes for certain topics like nature-based solutions, like plastic pollution, the certainty of that topic being at MIT for many years and having that as a way for faculty to engage, and connected to the real world, to have actual meaningful impact in the real world so that we can say the work we are doing, the energy that we're putting into these topics actually is shifting the needle in some ways around the world. And I'll talk about more examples of that in a few minutes. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, John. Joe.
Sure, thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. So it makes me incredibly happy to be here with all of you and all this energy and drive in the room and, the opportunities that are ahead of us that Julie outlined. So under the Fast Forward program that you all heard about, there's 5 areas. There's the sparking innovation, educating our future generations, working with governments, action, coordinating all of our climate efforts. And the 5th area is reducing our own direct impact here on campus. So those are the 5 areas. So the area that I'm probably nearest and dearest to my heart is the 5th one. Although I do think that we all recognize, MIT's greatest standing in the world is the first 4. Like, we're going to bring the solutions to the world in terms of climate and the innovations that need to happen in that space. But, our constituents, all have this desire to, reduce our own impact here on our campus where we can. So as Julie said, our desire is to eliminate all of direct emissions on our campus by 2050 with a near-term goal of being net zero by 2026. And I'm sure you've heard about some of the actions that are behind that. And as Julie said, this is gigantic. It's going to take multiple years. It's not a clear and easy solution ahead how we're going to decarbonize a dense urban research campus in the middle of a city. But I see, my role is, working with all of you to create, the structure and the capacity and the resources to advance the work. It's combining the operational expertise that we have in this room that's working on it, as well as the students and the faculty that are bringing some of these new ideas to the table that we have to look at. And the third prong of sort of the engagement is the partnerships that we need. We cannot solve this on our campus alone. We need much broader partnerships that are currently in motion with the city of Cambridge. Eversource is a major utility company, and how they bring sort of cleaner energy into these cities. We're actively engaged in those conversations with our peer institutions, Harvard, Boston University, Tufts, many others. Also, the district energy systems here in the city of Cambridge. It's really understanding how we do this at scale, because we just can't do it on our own. So engaging those partnerships is a key part of the work. So it's an all-in moment for MIT, and I'm just excited by all the folks that we have here in the room that are participating in this effort to decarbonize our campus.
Great. Also, more nuggets to pull forward from these two. Thanks so much, Joe. Go ahead, Susie.
Yeah, so I'm Susie Jones. I'm a senior project manager in the Office of Sustainability, and alongside Steve Lanou, we were sort of the inaugural team that launched the office with Julie back in 2013, so 10 years ago. So I think I officially am a person with institutional knowledge, which is really cool. I was also called an elder millennial by someone in my office. So I proudly carry those titles too. But I think today has really also made me reflect on just the 10 years of work that I've done with so many folks in the room. I think 2 significant things that have made me sort of proud and grateful for the partnership was working with Renda Gattas on the first 4 working groups, first 4 sustainability working groups that we launched back in 2015 on stormwater and labs and buildings and materials, and how foundational that's been, I think, to the transformation at MIT. And Renda has all this technical knowledge and brought all these recommendations back to the table, and we really worked together on sort of crafting that. I love writing a report, so we really worked together on crafting that first report. I also worked so closely with parking and transportation and Monica Lee and Tom's predecessor, Larry Brody, on rolling out Access MIT, which was this big paradigm shift in low carbon commuting at MIT, which put free transit embedded into staff people's ID cards and shifted from annual parking to daily parking so that people could make a choice every day to have a low carbon commute if they have that choice. So those are just some exciting projects I'm reflecting on in the last 10 years. And my position here has been able to grow and change over that time. And so in terms of the Fast Forward climate plan, I've really gotten to sort of delve into this connection between food and climate. So the Fast Forward calls upon MIT to set the first of its kind sort of climate and food goal. And so we're thinking through, how do you reduce the climate impact of our food system at MIT. And the other piece is the imperative of justice, which I'm sure John and I will both talk a lot about. But this sort of realization, this need that you cannot solve the climate crisis if equity and justice aren't front and center. So how do we carry that work into our sustainability work here on campus is just another area that we're starting to act on and think on and reflect on.
Excellent. Susie, thanks for connecting all those dots too
Yeah.
in your time. All right, Kate.
And I'm Kate. I want to start by saying thank you to Susie and the transportation office. I think that transit benefit kicked in like right after I got here 6 or so years ago. And I live in Providence and I have a low carbon commute on the train every day. Highlight of my day usually. So my world at MIT is experiential learning, which for my money is kind of the most exciting part of education here at MIT. So it's the hands-on, applied, real-world learning that students do through UROPs, through internships, through public service, maker spaces, all of that like stuff that makes MIT MIT and that students really gravitate to and enjoy. So that's my job. I would say that my ulterior motive or purpose or not so hidden agenda is the social impact flavor of experiential learning. And so bringing more public interest, more kind of social change types of experiences in for MIT students, whether that is in a faculty member's lab or working for nonprofits or government agencies on topics like climate change, like racial justice, like educational equity, and many, many more. So, so my connection to the plans, plural, that Julie sort of outlined, the Fast Forward plan makes a commitment to guarantee climate or clean energy experiential learning opportunity. It could be a UROP, could be an internship, to any student who wants one. And similarly, the Task Force 2021 report sort of says like, hey, MIT, you guys could do a little bit better on kind of funding and providing social impact opportunities, experiential learning opportunities for our students. So I am furiously raising money and furiously creating opportunities with the money raised. What you heard, the laughter at table 10 was that we sort of inadvertently discovered that 2 of the folks had been funded through an IAP mini grant project that my office sponsored for the first time this year. So we have some money to support these opportunities, and we hope to have a whole lot more in the not too distant future. And then the last piece that connects me to this, I serve on the Future of Climate Education Working Group that's part of the Climate Nucleus that's chaired by David McGee and David Sue, and they're doing some really terrific work, and Lisa's sort of at the forefront of that. So really, like, what I like to fantasize about in my spare time is like if you were gonna start with a blank piece of paper and reinvent MIT education so that every student that we graduate, every alum out in the world is like a turbocharged climate, you know, superhero, like what would that look like? How would you sort of build that education and those experiences that students have while they're here so that they're wearing capes when they leave?
Great, thank you, Kate. Excellent, excellent description. So many great parts here. Now you can understand where we pulled this together is the importance of really ensuring that we have these conversations both in depth and across one another. So as we inch towards the horizon piece, let's just take a moment and just, how do we put in the current, put this current moment into context in light of our approach with Sustainability Connect and look back, and while looking back to plan forward. So just quickly, what are some of the key elements that have shifted in the past 5 years that really become the diving board for us to move forward? Joe, let's start with you.
Sure. So, I was thinking back 5 years ago, and kind of where we were at, and what some of the new hope and optimism and abundance there is in the new energy era ahead of us. So there's a lot of real things happening today in this moment, and these are just a couple of things I jotted down. That 1 out of every 3 Americans today lives in a city that's committed to 100% renewable energy by 2050. That wasn't happening 5 years ago. We see more electric vehicles and electric bikes on our roadways around MIT and Cambridge and Boston. And we know that it's overtaking gas engines within a decade. You're not gonna be able to get a gas engine in a couple of years, but so many automakers and bike makers have made that transition. Yeah. We see many more smart devices in our buildings. So I had a new ecobee thermostat And I put it in and it said, oh, do you want to sign up for the demand limiting program with Eversource? And it sent me an email. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And they're like, if you let us control your thermostat during demand challenge days when the grid is the dirtiest, let us turn your thermostat up or down, we'll give you $45 in your Amazon account. Oh, who doesn't want that, right? I was like, I'm not going to tell my wife about this, but giving up the control of our thermostats. But within minutes, there was $45 in my Amazon account, and I'm my own utility company now. That wasn't happening 5 years ago, but think about the technology enablement that takes to make that happen. We see large-scale renewables being added to the grid by non-utility companies like MIT and our other partners, which we'll hear more announcements about how, as organizations, we can leverage our balance sheets and decarbonize the grid by adding these large renewable energy projects. That wasn't happening 5 years ago. We have the largest offshore wind project happening off of our coast. This is the largest offshore wind project in the country in the United States. Can you believe it's taken this long to get it going? But it's happening, so that's pretty exciting. We see localized grids taking center stage in New York City and here in Cambridge, MIT's district energy system. We see new transmission lines coming into Cambridge from Eversource. I know Doug Tuttle and others are here that are engaged in bringing all that new capacity into the city of Cambridge and Boston that we're going to need to electrify. We're planning on bringing those feeders through the campus here and now today. We see policy changes, the Inflation Reduction Act bringing $300 billion in climate solutions for towns, municipalities, organizations to implement the types of solutions that you're talking about today. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a 2050 plan that all towns and municipalities are planning around. They're doing the same thing we are to decarbonize our campus. They're seeking to decarbonize their towns. A new training and a new workforce is happening. With the new Vineyard Wind project, we see, job fairs, 200, 400 people showing up for job fairs with GIS backgrounds, engineering backgrounds, architecture backgrounds. 14 contractors are actively hiring. This is a new economy here in New England. It's happening and happening this past fall. We see businesses and organizations engaging like they never have before. MIT and Harvard and the city of Cambridge, condo owners, business owners, we're at the table every week downtown trying to think about ordinances that we can collectively work through that are achievable and scalable, but we have to work together to do that. And then the many, many new technology breakthroughs that we didn't even know about 5 years ago. We have microreactors happening. There's one in progress right now that we're going to learn from out in Utah. There's fusion energy, the breakthroughs that happened within the past 5 years here. This is a springboard for a new energy economy. Battery storage production facilities, you see it in the news today. We're making batteries, more and more batteries in this country for our cars and for our grid. Smart sensor networks, machine learning, deep geothermal. This is another MIT development. Many of you may have seen the micro millimeter wave drilling technique. This was an innovation that came out of fusion energy. So our ability to drill 7-10 kilometers into the earth is a whole new energy source for us today. So those are just some of the things. You take this moment and you think these were things weren't in the moment 5 years ago when we were here on this stage. So it definitely brings a sense of abundance and optimism.
Everybody take a deep breath. That's amazing.
That was just my short list from this morning.
Wow, that was like slam poetry, Joe. That was amazing. So we'll have to revisit a lot of the pieces that you have there, and I think that will play into the challenge of what you'll hear when we get to John in terms of those impacts of battery, increase of use of battery, electrification, and that's what we're going to have to grapple with. Susie, let's move to you.
Yeah, I think I might answer this question a little bit differently than you, Joe. But yeah, some of the things I was reflecting on in terms of some shifts in the areas that I work on is in terms of food systems. A decade ago, 5 years ago, folks were really concerned with food access. We were starting to create much better channels for getting local food to tables and to institutions. Childhood obesity in the last decade, right? We've developed a lot of programming around nutrition. And then I would say in the past few years, this new knowledge around the climate impact of our food system has joined the conversation. And I think it's really important to add that to the many, many years and decades of work that have been going on around food justice and food access, and bring that climate conversation into that piece and acknowledge that, yes, the food system is accountable for about 1/4 of global greenhouse gases, and we can work on that at the same time as we're working on sort of food access and food justice. And there's so many folks in the Boston area that are working deeply on these issues, and I think MIT can definitely sort of connect to. I think in that same food space, during the pandemic, I think we saw how critical the food system is to community resiliency. And when those supply chains break down and the conditions in some of the places where folks were packing meat and so forth degrade, we see what happens to the resiliency of our food system. So the respect we have now for grocery store workers and food service workers who literally kept us alive during the pandemic, I think there's just this real new awareness and just a much more holistic approach to really making our food system both like climate friendly, but also just and so forth. So I think that conversation I've seen shift a lot. A part of the MIT conversation that I think has shifted in the last 5 years, due in large part to Jeff Smith, I think is just the focus on open space at MIT. This open space, indoor, outdoor environment, I think became such a critical piece to problem solving in the last few years. And so I think there's a lot of potential in really understanding how open space can bring together communities, it can serve as a test bed, and create these new opportunities to sort of come together and experience the outdoors and each other and build stronger communities. And I think, yeah, just this sort of absolute renewed focus on the impact of systemic racism. And I think that conversation has dispersed much more widely in the past couple years. And for those that went to the MLK luncheon and heard Dr. Angela Davis speak, and she said, let's not forget 2020 and the people that came out to demand that systemic racism be addressed. And another all-in moment when President Rife sent out that letter and said, you know, this time all of us, especially those who are white and those in positions of leadership at every level, need to be all in, individually and together, in the struggle to achieve racial equity and justice at MIT. And he specifically called out how procurement plays a role in social change and how investment in Black and small businesses and our community can really be an impact for social change. And so I think that's just an incredible area that's just starting to expand more deeply at MIT. I'll stop there.
That was excellent. So many amazing inspirational pieces. Kate, go ahead on the last one here.
So what's shifted in the past 5 years? I was thinking about, like, I'm going to answer it differently than Susie and than Joe did. I was thinking about institutional change, and I was really involved in a lot of the COVID response and COVID planning, and I think that I rewrote the travel policy like 7 times. No joke, thought that I should get like a little card that you punch and I get a free sandwich after 12 revisions. So we didn't quite get to 12 and I'm still waiting on my sandwich. But I think one of the things that I took away from that experience, which was not always smooth, and you know there were definitely bumps along the way, was just how innovative and adaptive and how much, like how quickly MIT can change when there's a crisis, right? COVID comes and like watching people in this community leap into action was so inspiring, and like bringing their expertise and their time and energy and passions to bear on the problem was like, damn, I'm so proud to be part of this community and I'm so in awe of my colleagues. And like if you could do that with the slower moving crisis that is climate change, if we really brought the same kind of oomph to bear on sustainability and climate, like it made me more optimistic that like this place can really focus and make a huge difference to our students, to our staff members and faculty members, and to the world. So I think the other piece that's changed in thinking about institutional changes, our peers have made progress that might nudge us in similar directions. Like nothing motivates MIT like Stanford or Harvard doing something first. And so, Stanford now has a sustainability school. And we've got a computing school. Computing excites me somewhat less than sustainability. We've got a design academy, which is very exciting. But I think figuring out like what is MIT's stamp going to be? How do we sort of similarly, what form does it take here? Will be interesting to watch in the next 5 years.
Great, excellent points. Thanks so much. And John.
Thank you. So I've been on my phone. I haven't been texting. I actually changed my answer after Joe gave his answer. So I wrote some notes. Being last, I don't want to be the bummer in this group, but I do want to remind us of the challenge with, in the last 5 years, what do we know better? So we know more about Earth systems and the state of the planet than ever in human history. That's an obvious statement. But in the last 5 years, we know, on the one hand, the optimistic side, the worst case scenario is off the table. So representative concentration pathway 8.5, which is the most extreme warming scenario that climate scientists consider, is basically off the table. It's not going to happen. We know that now. And that's a huge, we should all breathe this huge sigh of relief, because that was a complete disaster scenario. That was based on a 5-fold increase in coal combustion, which was a few years ago in the cards because of the increase in coal in developing regions of the world. That's not going to happen. We also know, coupled to that, that the best case scenario is 99% not going to happen either. We are going to exceed 1.5 degrees. We pretty much know that. So all of those corporate climate commitments that you see that, well, we are working to maintain average surface temperature below 1.5 degrees, they're going to have to be recast. In around 2030, when it's clear by about 2033 or so, we're going to go beyond 1.5.
Okay.
The really interesting, to me, the really interesting point about this is that we are much better aware of the bounds of what we're facing. 2 to 4 degrees, probably close to between 2 and 3 degrees. Keep this in mind, one other piece to this, that during the pandemic, when in 2020, the worst part of the pandemic that year, when large parts of the economy were shut down, transportation, people not going to work, some heavy industry, aviation, carbon dioxide emissions decreased by about 5.4%. Okay, that's a fairly good number that we know. To be able to reach the rapid decarbonization, to achieve the rapid decarbonization that's being recommended, is about a 50% reduction per decade, which is about a 7% reduction per year, right? So during the pandemic, when we were all at home Zooming in and not driving to work and all that, we only reached 5.4%. So again, there's an optimistic side to this, which is that it's not tweaking the system. We're not tweaking the economy. We're going through a wholesale transformation to be able to achieve our goals. And that, for me, means that the role, going back to the institution, the role of the academy, of the university, we are within the Anthropocene. We're not serving the industrialization of the world any longer. We're actually serving the reindustrialization of another kind of world focused on this great challenge. And Susie said it before, we're not going to be able to meet our goals if we don't also keep our eye on and very attentive to the justice issues. The fact is, actually, if you narrowly thought that the goal is to reduce carbon dioxide emissions per year, you can reach that goal. Absolutely. You could do it in a really inhumane way. But that's not what we want to do, obviously. This transformative opportunity that we have means that we can consider, what does this reindustrialization look like? How are we serving more people? How are we lifting more people out of poverty, educating more people, and giving better opportunity to everyone? And that's the subject of climate justice. So my thought here is that in the last 5 years, it's pretty clear that we need to think about a completely different role for the academy that contrasts what it was when MIT was founded 2 days after the start of the Civil War.
Excellent points. Thank you so much, John. I mean, it really is incredible to take a moment to reflect on the past 5 years, recognizing that with everything that everybody articulated, 2 of those years we were home, right? And just still somehow moving all of this along. So excellent reflections. Let's take a moment as we build up towards the piece of where we look ahead to just hear from each of you to both inspire, what's inspiring you to also inspire our audience as we think about how to, shift our own, transform our own approaches. So I want to start this time with Susie, and think about what is inspiring you in your work, and we'll just go around all of you, and then following from that, we'll go to the next slide, please.
Get our slides up.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. There we go. So we're going to start with Susie.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd show a couple photos from this effort we coordinated with the anthropology department, STS, and history last year called the Living Climate Futures Symposium. And those are just a couple snapshots from that. The first one was taken during this Indigenous Earth Day celebration that was right outside of this data center. And these folks that you see up there were really fortunate. The postdoc that was working on putting that symposium together is now working alongside John and ESI. And so a lot of that work that went on last year to build these connections to community partners that are working in this space of climate justice gets to now be carried through through ESI, which is wonderful. But there's a couple folks in that photo that is above me, specifically Ryan Emanuel, who's a professor at Duke University and a member of the Lumbee tribe in North Carolina, and Jay Julius, who's a member of the Lummi Nation out in Washington State. And I just recommend if you see events featuring these guys, like please go. Their voice added to a technical discussion, a discussion around decarbonization is so critical and necessary. And sometimes this work feels like it's never gonna happen, like change is so slow, and how do we really achieve justice? But when you listen to these guys speak, it seems possible. I mean, just hearing them speak over a number of occasions, my mind has started to grow and change, and I'm reflecting on climate science in this really different way. So just a push if you have the opportunity to integrate some Indigenous science, Indigenous knowledge into the areas that you're all working on in this climate action work. It's just so valuable. And I'll just say a couple of those folks, right? Like one, his great-grandparents were pre-contact. So they grew up in a world where the United States hadn't been colonized yet. And so their relationship to nature looks very different from the relationship to nature that many of us have in cities. And Ryan Emanuel, you know, who's a environmental professor down in North Carolina, said these climate conversations can feel frustrating when everyone's looking forward and saying, okay, starting now, our 2017 baseline, we're gonna reduce carbon by this amount, and we're looking forward, and we're looking forward, and we're looking forward. But we're not looking back, and we're not looking at what does the last 1,000 years look like? He says we can't move forward unless we also repair. So we need to look forward, fast forward, and I think we need to do, as I've coined it, like a little bit of a climate rewind too. And so just having the opportunity to interface with the folks up on that screen is just really, really inspiring. And then, of course, I just love spaces like the Food Project in Boston. And if you do get an opportunity to explore these growing spaces, it's conversations we've had at MIT around how can MIT create sort of an experiential learning I'm getting the 0 minutes space, but certainly sort of exploring on the ground food systems work is also very inspiring. Stop. It's hard to stop.
I know, it's so many good pieces here. Remember, these are nuggets for many, many more conversations. We're just gonna have to do
lightning
rounds here because we really want to end with where are we going to go from here. And this is really meant to be the launching place for an agreement. You are all going to sign off on continuing to meet with me again and others in the room so we can really frame this. But Kate, why don't you, next slide, please.
So clearly we're talking too much.
Some of us.
Yeah.
Just pay attention to Steve, okay? Pay attention to Steve.
Yeah, so what inspires me is the MIT community, right? This is both pandering and utterly true. I love coming to this event because you see people that you don't sort of have an excuse to work with otherwise, and you try and dream up ways to have an excuse to work with them. And I find this community to be brilliant and committed, and to hear Joe, monologue about all of the good things that are happening in such a positive way, while I know that he's probably sleep deprived from dealing with W20 for the past 2 weeks. It is very inspiring, and knowing that in the experiential learning world, ESI does such amazing work. John and Sarah, we sent a group of students to Mongolia in January to look with Mike Short through the NEAT program. that sounded amazing. There's sustainability and climate stuff kind of cropping up all over the place, and it's really cool to see how many different flowers are blooming across campus.
Excellent, right on point. Thank you, Kate. John, next slide, please.
Okay, so I'll do this really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do this really quickly. So the ESI has started up a climate justice program. We're not the only program on campus. There's lots of other professors working in environmental justice and climate justice, energy transitions, the Roosevelt Project, Center for Energy, Environment, and Policy Research, faculty in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. Having said that, it seemed to me and a number of us, Brianna Meyer, Chris Rabe in particular, those two, that there's, and Angel, Marcela Angel, all of the ESI, that we really needed to provide a home for a multi-year climate justice program. So on the upper left-hand side, that's an image of a coal processing plant in Western Pennsylvania. We started that work several years ago to address energy transitions, or sometimes labeled as just transitions. In other words, what are the consequences of moving to a low carbon future for people working in extractive industries? We provided information about the tax base of that area, Greene County, Pennsylvania, to its residents so that they understood better what would be the consequence of coal just leaving that area. That's just transitions. In the middle, on the top, you've got flaring from an oil well in the Amazon. That's my own photograph of and below that, a mine in Madagascar. Those two images represent the transition from, the way I like to think about that transition is moving from a fuels-intensive economy to a minerals-intensive economy. And just because we're going to renewable green technology doesn't mean that there aren't going to be environmental consequences. There are going to be really major environmental consequences because the industry that's going to have to expand hugely is mining. And mining, as you know, is one notch below fossil fuels in terms of its global environmental challenges. And that leads to the image on the right, which is that we've been doing a good bit of work on what is the environmental justice. What are the environmental justice issues of this transition? So for us, just the synopsis is climate justice is environmental justice plus energy or just transitions. Those two topics brought together and coupled together because they are, you cannot disentangle them. And looking at them more holistically is what we're after. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And I know we're finding that framework coming out of the ESI so helpful for us to think about how to consider these implications on the campus. Joe, I'm asking you to do me a favor. You provided such an incredible list of possibilities. I mean, I can't wait to review that. Can you both speak to your inspiration and then use that to leap into what you envision over the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Next slide, please.
So what inspires me, even as much as everyone in this room today that's all working on decarbonizing our campus, is the opportunities for advancing knowledge and know-how in our industry. So I'm an engineer, I'm a geek. This is the cable laying ship that many of you may have heard is just recently completed laying the underwater cables out off of our coastline to bring all that wind power to Massachusetts. So my son is actually an engineer working on one of these ships. So he's not the person walking the dog. He's not actually on the big ship, but he's on the little ship, the tugboat that kind of moves it around. So what inspires me is the knowledge and know-how that you get to learn. This whole energy economy is transitioning. The cables that are being laid are like 100 pounds a foot. And we don't have the knowledge and know-how in this country to do that. We have to partner with others. We have to learn from others. So my son gets to work from people from the Ukraine, Denmark, Italy. This is all their equipment. They have to bring it over here. They have to teach us how to use this. We're going to be constructing wind towers that are almost as tall as the Eiffel Tower. They have blades that are 100 yards long as a football field. How we do that, how the logistics chain that you need to bring this into the country, move it around the country, get it deployed, is pretty incredible. To learn how this barge moves on the ocean floor like a spider with posts, it doesn't have a motor. So we're gonna learn so much over the next several years as we start to transition this. So that's what inspires me is this opportunity for more knowledge and know-how and learning from others, bigger partnerships, bigger market models. So kind of looking forward to this, the one thing that we think about the future is the radical modernization of the U.S. power grid. Okay, so the U.S. power grid, some of you may have heard me say this before, it's the largest machine humankind has ever built. And it has taken us decades to build this. It lives in every single one of our walls. In your bedroom where you plug your phone in, it connects all of us. It is not going to support the decarbonized economy that we have ahead of us. It's going to radically change, just like this boat is radically changing the way that we think about how we deploy cables. It's also going to require the change of hundreds of millions of devices that plug into the electric grid. All of your appliances, all of your heating systems, your car, we're all going to become our own utility companies. That is going to be an amazing opportunity for knowledge and know-how, and how we navigate that culturally is going to be a very significant change. So cultural change, new market models, just the way that I get $45 in my Amazon account. All these things are going to emerge over the next couple of years, and I think that's what I'm the most optimistic about and looking forward to adapting to.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, does anybody, can we do lunch an hour later, team? No. I tried. See what it's like in my office
Steve was the only one that
sometimes?
said no, by the way.
See what I have to put up with?
Steve.
All right, Susie, why don't we go to you? Just a minute to talk about what you see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think just a concentration on sort of this idea of purchasing with purpose, whether that's food or whether that's renewable energy, really thinking about what does it mean to purchase with MIT dollars? How can that build wealth in communities that have been sort of shut out of that? And I think that's just an effort we're seeing start, and I hope sort of just continues to grow. And the other piece, I think we heard the continued questions of like, where do I put this waste? Where does this go? And I totally understand how frustrating that is. And I think as we continue to think about a circular economy on campus, we need to do that because it makes environmental sense for sure. But I think if we really start to understand, well, where is our waste even going? And what communities are these facilities sited in? And what is that like to sort of live next to a toxic waste facility? And sort of think about the importance of being circular from that sense, and also the equity piece that Miho brought up, right? Like sharing resources is great for the environment. It's also great for people. So thinking about the circular economy that way and thinking about purchasing that way, I think are going to be wonderful on the horizon efforts.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm actually going to go to John and then end on thinking about the role of education. Go ahead, John, thanks.
Yeah, so very simply, I think for me, one of the major things that I'm looking forward to is us as a community here at MIT, but beyond MIT, sort of adopting a sort of radical honesty about this transition. This transition is not going to be without blemishes. So the 100 pounds of cable required, a good bit of that is copper. Copper is mined in Chile and different other places, but mostly Chile. The water issues in Chile and mining are extreme. And I just came back from Colombia just last week. The mining that's being driven partly by need for primary metals and rare earth metals is leading to enormous amounts of illegal mining. And so the radical honesty that I think we need to adopt is a much more sort of dispassionate, and it's an MIT view, a numbers-driven view of what's actually happening around the world, and being in a developed context, realizing that it's really the developing regions of the world that are going to bear the brunt of climate consequences, but also part of the brunt of our solutions to climate change. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Excellent, thank you so much. I love that framework of radical honesty. Kate, let's end with you, and then I think I can probably beg like 2 questions, and then we'll move into, I just told 1. Okay, go ahead, Kate.
1.
The lucky person.
I like that you have sort of a panel of radicals. Everybody's talking about radical honesty and radical change. And I think that the exciting and tantalizing promise of the next decade is thinking about a radical change in the way that we educate students. Like climate and sustainability are the defining challenges of the next century, right? And so MIT was founded a couple days after the Civil War started, and in some ways, in some corners of the university, we still teach like it's 1865, right? Like we haven't sort of brought to bear the innovation that MIT is so famous for on the research side of the house to the way that we educate our students. And I think we're overdue for kind of a really intense, exciting rethink of what do we teach, how do we teach, and why are we teaching it? And I know that there's sort of like a little bit of squeamishness within academia when you start talking too much about purpose and like, climate evangelists. But I think starting to talk about like there is sort of an ethical, moral obligation of the university in terms of its educational mission. When you start talking about that, I think it suggests that perhaps we could do more and do different in terms of how we're teaching our students in a way that really, like the research that is happening here is incredible, and I don't want to diminish that, but the sort of multiplier effect of we have 11,000 students here at any given time. Like if all of those students going out into industry and government and to countries all around the world, like if you had those folks trained up and informed about climate, prepared to work on climate, and inspired to work on climate, like that's a hell of a legacy for MIT to have.
Amazing. Perfect note to end on there. I mean, let's, when we think about reconnecting or a theme for next year around radical honesty and climate and sustainability, I think it would open up some really rich discussions. These are complex issues we're grappling with, and we want to make sure we provide the space here at MIT in our teams looking around to do this together. We have to call for more conversations. I mean, you can tell here with the leadership, people are willing to have these conversations. When you're working on projects and things get challenging, find us. Like, let's make the space to actually talk about what we're grappling with so we're not always defaulting back to the way we do things today. Let's keep us moving forward. And then for those of you who can stay after lunch, please join us for the Mitos 2.0 workshop where you can bring your ideas to bear on thinking about the future. And speaking of the future, I have this great idea for my team next year. We'll do a Julie Newman lunch next year. We'll just do like a smoothie bar. And then we can have like 15 minutes for lunch and a lot more conversation. I think they're shaking their head. They're saying no. I'm just saying that's my proposal for next year. Okay, let's move. I think we have one or two more time for questions, and then we're moving to awards. Don't be afraid of my team, everybody. You can ask a question. Anybody? Questions, comment? All right, go ahead.
I really appreciate the framing that you've put on this, especially the radical honesty. And it brings to mind for me this kind of expanded MIT motto, mind, hand, and heart. And to have that radical honesty, we're going to need a kind of a deeper well of empathy and courage to bring to that. And it feels like a really important charge for us to be working on. So I thank the panel for that.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. All right, I'm getting the evil eye here. So again, I want to just thank our panelists. I think this is an excellent start for our conversation. And please provide feedback on other strands we can move forward, and we'll be coming back together again. So thanks, everybody.